Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar on reading academic articles. I know many of you could not make it today, so I'll be sure to record this, which I am doing now, and be able to watch it later. I'll have it available on YouTube so that you can see it. So what we're talking about today is basically how to read an academic article. Now, I'm sure everyone knows how to read, and I'm sure that everyone has read an academic article. However, there are tips and tricks that can help you when you're doing research for your dissertation or for a big research project. In most large research projects, you might have 50 or 60 citations or references. In a dissertation, it's closer to 200 references. So you're going to be reading a lot. And when you're reading all of that, you want to know how to do it the right way, how to do it in a way that's sustainable so that you can get through the article, get through the class, get through your dissertation. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about several things. First, it's going to be a review of basically the parts of the academic article. And then we're going to look at those parts and talk about what would you need to read based on your own goals. Like, what is it, the goal that you have when you're sitting down to read an article? What is that goal? And then what do you need to do to fix it or to do something differently? Then, of course, we're going to talk about speed reading, academic work. Then we're going to talk about evaluating the methodology of the work. What should you look for to figure out if this is something that is going to be valuable to you, basically, or valuable in the future. Then figuring out if the author is credible, important. How do you do that? You know, you often hear, I want you to use credible citations or credible references. What does that mean, that word credible? We're going to talk about that. And then using an article to develop your topic more. So if you have a topic like for a research paper or for a dissertation, and you want to develop it more, you want to figure out if it's the right topic, if there's other people who are doing that topic, you want to actually know how to find more research using that topic. Okay, so I'm going to dive right on in. And remember, you can always email me with questions you have that come up during this presentation. So the first thing, obviously, the parts of the academic article and what parts you should read based on your own goals. So when you all probably know, or you've known, that the parts of an academic article are typically the abstract, the literature review, the methodology, the results, the discussion or findings, and then the references. And these are the main parts of any academic article. Now, that being said, there are some academic articles that may, in fact, not have a methodology. They might be a literature review article in which a scholar goes through a bunch of different articles and pulls together a literature review on the subject. So let's say 10 authors have been writing about reading mentorship, developing reading in students, and an author wants to come along and take all of those articles, all 10 of those articles, it'd actually probably be more like 20 or 30, and they want to pull them all together into one academic article. That's called a literature review article. Typically, those aren't considered research articles in and of the fact that typically you won't see any research actually being done. This is more of an opinion or a summary kind of thing. Nothing new is being created. So if you don't see a methodology, it's very likely that the article you have is definitely not a research-based article. It doesn't mean it can't be helpful or provide information, but you wouldn't use it in a dissertation or in a paper simply because the author is actually just going over other people's articles. However, you could use it to better understand a subject or to find articles that you want to go and look at yourself. So you just look up the articles that the author in the literature review article is is writing about, and then you go find those articles. Hi, Marilyn. It's good to see you. I'm glad you were able to make it. Um, so in that case, when you don't see the methodology section, then you're going to know that this not really something you're going to be citing in your dissertation or a research paper. You'll often see the results or findings section and then the discussion afterwards. Sometimes these are drawn in together. It's hard to tell which is which. And that's important when you think about the parts you want to read based on your goals. We'll talk about that in just a second. And then finally, probably the most important part of an academic research article is the references. The references have many uses. You can find articles that you need for future research. You can see who's popular in the field, and you can find out if the author is using good references or quality references in their study to see whether or not they're actually doing a good job with this research. And that goes to what we're going to talk about in a little bit, is checking the credibility of an article. So that leads us to what parts should you read based on your own goals. So obviously, this is based on what you're doing. But say, for example, you're trying to get an understanding of the field, understanding what's written about a topic. Say you're going to pick a topic like video games, and you want to look at violence in video games. So you want to get a better understanding of what research has been done on violence in video games. In that case, what you'll probably want to do is read the abstracts of several articles and see what is being done. Look over those abstracts, see what they're saying, what methodology is being used. All of that should be in the abstract. And what results did they find? That all should be in an abstract. And you could scan the abstracts and get an idea of what the field is all about. The other thing that you can do if you're trying to get to know a subject better or understand a subject more deeply is you would just need to read the literature review. Find an article that's similar to the topic that you want to study, or if you're doing a research paper, is the topic that you're looking for, and read their literature review. See who they're talking about. Who do they think is important? What are they saying the research has said before? So you could, depending on the nature of your work, you could get a better understanding of it through just reading the literature reviews. Now, if you're actually looking for something to support your ideas in a paper or in your dissertation, in your literature review of your dissertation, then what's important is the results and the discussion. So the last part of the article. You want to read what this author found from their study. You don't want to be using their literature review as something you're citing, because they're just citing other people. That's secondary sources. You can use if you want to cite something from their literature review, you can go find that article and then you can read it and you can cite it. But the main thing you're looking at this article for, if you're using it for research, is the results in the discussion. So if you know enough about a topic, you don't need to read anything else. You look at the abstract to make sure it's relevant for you, your topic, and then you go down and you read the results, the findings, and the discussion. What did they find? How did what they find support your ideas? How can you use it to build on what you're writing about in your paper or what you're writing about in your literature review? So that ending part of the article is usually only a page, maybe 2 pages. So when you're really trying to dig in and find research, those are the places you should really focus on. Now, if you're going to do a research study yourself, like if you're working on your dissertation, the methodology section of articles should be particularly important to you, because it can help you learn what methodologies are being used in the field and how are they being used. And it'll also help you when you go to design your methods to understand the methods that other people have used in the past. That way, you'll be able to better understand how you're going to do your own study. That being said, when you're evaluating an article for its quality, you are going to want to read the methods section as well. So that's another process. And again, we'll talk about that in just a moment. And finally, if you're short on ideas and you want to develop your topic more, we'll talk about this as well. But if that's the case, your best friend is going to be the last few pages of the article, which will be the future recommendations for research and the references. Because the references will tell you what you want to know about the field, who's important. And when you compare the reference lists of several articles together, so you have 5 articles that are all about your topic or all about the subject that you're looking at, and you look at the reference list of all 5 of those articles, you're getting a great view as to what is important in the field, who is important in the field, what articles are being read, what articles are being used. You have a bird's eye view of that by comparing and contrasting the different references. And Marilyn, if you have a question at any point, just raise your hand and I can pause, and you can either type it in the comments or you can turn on your mic and ask the question. Okay. Oh, good. Was that a practice? I bet that was a practice. Okay. So let's say now you found some articles that you really want to read and you want to go through in order to better understand a topic, to build a literature review, or to use as sources in your papers for school. So how do you keep from reading every word in the article and taking like a week to finish all the articles? Well, there's some tips that we all use in the field when we're reading academic work. And the first thing you want to do is you want to read the abstract. That tells you, it should tell you in a nutshell, exactly what this article is about. What were their findings? What methodology did they use? What was their goal? What was their intention? What were their research questions or hypotheses? The abstract should give you a good, solid understanding of the article before you even dive into it. But there are very sexy abstracts that can lead you astray and make you think, oh, this article is amazing. This article is exactly what I want. And then you get into the article and you start reading it and you realize this is nothing like what I need. This is not on the topic that I was thinking it was on, and this doesn't apply to me at all. So the abstract isn't the only place you should ever go, and you should never depend on an abstract to be what you actually are citing in your papers or in your literature review. The abstract is meant to just tell you whether you should read the article or not. The next step is to speed read the article. In order to do that, the first thing you're going to do is read the first sentence of each paragraph in the literature review. Now, a well-written literature review, a well-written paper, is going to have the topic of each paragraph in the first sentence. So by reading the first sentence of every paragraph in the literature review, you're getting an idea of what this person is saying. You can highlight sentences that you really think are important and go back and read those paragraphs later. But for the most part, you're just wanting to go through and get a sense of what's happening. Then you want to skim through the methodology just so you understand more about who this person is and what they're doing. Who did they study? Does the people that they study apply to what you need for your own paper, for your own methods? What is it that is it applicable to you? Is it applicable to your situation? That kind of thing. Then you want to look at the discussion. Now you can look at the results, but honestly, the results probably aren't going to make a lot of sense unless it's qualitative, and even then, the results may not tell you much. The discussion, though, is when the author takes what they've learned from the research and what they've learned in the literature and puts it together to make sense. So that would be something that you'd want to read in full. You want to read the discussion to see what they said. Once you've done that, you've now sped through this article. You basically could take as long as 10 minutes to review an article, and maybe even less, maybe even a minute you could go through it. I'm gonna give you an example in just a second. Um, Go back and read anything that you want to know more about. If you want to go into more depth on their results, go into their results section. If there were things in the literature review you didn't know and you want to learn more about, then go back into the literature review. That way you can kind of see more what the author is saying, and you get out of the article what you want, and then move on to the next article. That's what's important. Okay, so let's go through an example really quickly. I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to share this. Okay. All right, so the strengths of strong ties, social networks, and intergroup conflict in organizations. That's a big, giant mess of stuff there. So what does it all mean? So going through the speed reading, we're going to first look at the abstract. The relationship between social networks and conflict between organizational units was investigated. Results indicated that low conflict organizations are characterized by higher numbers of intergroup strong ties measured as frequent contacts than are high conflict organizations. Further comparisons of network configuration in the organization suggested that high and low conflict organization feature significantly different social structures. Okay? There you go. That's what the article is about. So let's see what else we have here. We look at the first sentence. Feature of social systems, intergroup conflict has been studied in a variety of perspectives. Okay. The bulk of imperial research on conflict in organization has been in micro or orientation and experimental or quasi-experimental paradigms. Consistent with this micro-focus, empirical studies of conflict have been limited to people and groups within single organizations. The approach taken here complements and extends traditional research in a number of ways. Although the literature on conflict has emphasized micro or process approach, one structural argument surfaces repeatedly in a range of disciplines. At least three casual explanations may advance the general observation that cross-cutting ties or contacts between humans and between social units reduce intergroup conflict. Prominent feature compelling groups is the tendency for their members to become more cohesively and internally developing negative stereotypes and distortions of the group. A third function of intergroup contact is providing channels for dispute resolution. Of course, many contingencies may moderate the effects of intergroup contact. There are scholarly agreements on intergroup contact generally reduces conflict. It is reasonable to expect that some kind of effect and experience is necessary to overcome racial prejudice. No research to date has been done to consider the impact of frequency of internal intergroups. So what we've learned so far by just skimming the first sentence is that the author feels that the research is showing that intergroup conflict is lessened when you have networks talking to each other, people to each other. However, most of the research has been done on microaggressions or micro processes and not looking at the bigger picture. So this author, I'm assuming, is then going to look at the bigger picture. We go on, we could read more. Now, of course, there's a lot of stuff that was said here that I don't really understand because I'm not an expert on this. So I would want to go back maybe and read that later. But right now I'm just speed reading through it. So we keep on going here. We get to the hypothesis. Low conflict organizations will feature more frequent outgroup or external strong ties than high conflict organizations. Second hypothesis, the frequency of internal strong ties will be lower in low conflict organizations. So there's two hypotheses, okay? Now, the methods, what do we need to know? just the basics. Again, first sentence, the data on 20 organizations in the study was drawn from the data bank of 40 organizations, which I created in an effort to generate normative data about networks and organizations and their relations and their performance. So on the surface, it seems like they've pulled a lot of information there, but it was her and she created the database. So I'm wondering where that database came from. So I'd probably want to read more about that. And then we have a table. So let's look at the table, see if we can understand what's going on just from the table. If an author is good, their table should be understandable without any context. We keep on going down, talking about conflict levels, identifications of groups. So we get to the results. Again, we don't really need to read the results. Let's see. If they have a discussion section, we just keep on zooming down. Keep on zooming down. Again, lots and lots of results here. Conclusions. Now I'm just going to read through the conclusions. I would probably read this whole thing and learn what was found in this study. So that's like 2 pages, maybe 3. And that's it. Then we have the references. Especially this last paragraph would be good to read. But you can see we've accomplished that now in a matter of just a few minutes. I've looked through that entire article. I know a little bit about what it's saying, enough that I could probably guess what's going on, and I've read through the final results or conclusions, so I kind of know what the author is saying. And now I've read through that article. Does that make sense? Sam, do you have any questions? Okay, great. So that's speed reading. That's speed reading through an article. Obviously, if you had the article in front of you and you were reading it instead of me reading it to you, you would probably have an even better understanding of it. If I wasn't reading really for out loud, I would probably have a better understanding of it too. And that's just from reading that first sentence in a paragraph. So it also teaches the importance of academic writing to make sure that your first sentence in your paragraphs orients the reader to what's going on and has the most important information in it that you're going to then substantiate with sources later in the paragraph. Okay. So now we want to evaluate the methodology. And in this situation, you're going to evaluate the methodology of an article to make sure that the article is something that is valuable, that is going to be useful for you in your research, and that the author did a good job. There's certain things that you want to really know from the onset of the article. Is it qualitative or quantitative? Because that's going to be different in how you read the article. Qualitative articles obviously will have done some kind of research involving interviews and talking to people. Quantitative research is going to be done by looking at a database and analyzing a database. Now, you're not expected to know statistics to understand whether the study is done properly. You want to look at the bigger picture, the context of the study, to see if it's something that you feel was done properly based on your knowledge of the field, which you get through your research classes that you take. So was it quant or qual? That's important. How many participants did they have? If it's a quantitative study, the number of participants usually will dictate how strong the study is. Now, in the article we previously looked at, she looked at 20 organizations from a database. Now, how much was in the database, how much data was there, I'm not sure. But the database had a population of 40, and she looked at 20 of them. So she looked at half of the population. That's a great sample. If you can sample half the population of any given thing, that's a great sample. So in quantitative, it's not always exactly going to be clear cut. If you have a group of people that you're studying, let's say women of color with doctoral degrees in nursing that teach at major universities, That's your topic. That's what you're looking for, or that's the people that you want to study. In truth, there are probably only maybe 100 of them in the country um, that are doing that job. If you could sample 10, that's 10% of the population. That could be statistically significant. Um, the more would be better, but your job really isn't to look at whether it was statistically significant. They should have found or present that information. But what you want to kind of look at is how much of the population did they sample? If it's qualitative, who did they interview and how many people did they interview? You want to know where the study was done. More and more with our international world and with our the ability of Google and the internet, you could easily find articles from Pakistan, India, Russia, China, Azerbaijan, um, Romania, US, Canada, Mexico, all of these different places. You could find people who are doing scholarship and creating articles. Um, some are published in journals that are reputable, some are not. Some are published online only. Some are published in self-publications. So you want to know where the study was done, mainly to see, do you think it's going to apply to your situation? Clearly, a study that's done in a rural country is maybe not going to apply in a more urban country, um, different languages, different understandings of things, different meanings, different cultural contexts. Do they apply to what you're looking at or not? That's what you have to do to evaluate whether or not the methodology was done. The article is going to be useful to you. The article might say useful things. If it was done in a way that is different or very off from what you would do in your context, then it probably isn't really as fitting or a good article for you to use. This is really where your evaluation skills come in. Could the study then be applied to another context? If it's quantitative, does the author say it's generalizable? If it's qualitative, is the context that it was done in something that relates to where you're looking at? So if you're studying, let's go back to our K-12 reading mentorship, and you're studying, you want to understand how mentors can help students read better. So you find a study that was done in India on their education system and their reading mentorship. Do you think India would work? Do you think that teaching reading is the same in India as it is in the US? Does the language matter? Does the subject matter? What kind of schools were they in? Were they public? Were they private? What age groups were they looking at? What age groups do you want to learn about or study about? That's where you're going to start to do the evaluation. In a lot of cases, you'll find that article does indeed fit to what you're looking at, and the methodology was done correctly, and it was done in a way that the results could apply to the area that you're in. That's what you're evaluating for. How do the results of this study actually apply to what I'm at or what I want to know more about? And then a really good study should be able to be repeated based on what you read in the methods section. So if you read the methods and you could actually go out and do the study exactly in the same way that that person did, then that means that they did very good on reporting their methodology, which means it's probably a good study. It's probably done well thought out, because they knew or they understood that somebody might want to go and replicate this at some point. And that's the nature of research. Research should be replicable, replicatable. Replicable, I think, is actually a word. I'm not entirely 100% sure, but I think so. Okay. So this leads us then to our next point, and that's figuring out if an author is credible or important. And there's two easy ways to do this. One is to look at Google Scholar and see how often they're cited. And two, to see if they're mentioned in other people's work. An example of this from my dissertation, I was looking at work-life balance, and I had found a bunch of articles and I had read them, but I saw that this one author, Nippert Ing, had been cited in almost every article I read. And so I thought, well, who is this person? So I did some more research just specifically on that author and found that she was the quintessential researcher, or a seminal researcher in boundary management in organizations. That she had done some groundbreaking studies and written several books. So I ended up getting her book and reading some of her academic articles, and that gave me a much better understanding of my topic. I did that basically by noticing who comes up often in the research about boundaries. Now I'm going to show you an example. Let's zoom out again to our screen. And we're going to share this window. Okay, what I'm sharing with you now is basically a Google Scholar window. And you can see that just for the fun of it, for the giggles, I looked up Northouse. Northouse being the person who is considered the master of leadership studies. His books are often used. And so I go down here. Can you see my mouse? Yes, I go down here to cited by. So Northouse book, Leadership Theory and Practice, has been cited by 16,000 people. I would say Northouse is a pretty relevant author if he's been cited by 16,000 people. But we go down and let's look at some of the other articles. So here's another book that he has written. Now remember, we're looking at PG Northouse, not other Northhouses. This book was written in 2017 and it's already been cited 500 times. So it's only a few years old and it's been cited many times. That's telling me that indeed that is a seminal author or an important author. Whoever this L.L. Northouse is looks like some kind of doctor or nurse, and they seem to have been very well cited as well. But what you'll be doing is you're going to be looking for articles that you can use in research. So let's look up transformational leadership. So let's look at that and let's see what articles come up. So we've got some books, but we just want to look at articles. And let's say we want to look at articles since 2015. So we want them to be relevant. And so we're looking at these articles, and you can see in the articles how many times they've been cited. This begins to tell you, are they important? What's the deal? So this article here came out in 2016, and it's only been cited by people. I'd probably say that these authors aren't as relevant in the field, or this article isn't very relevant in the field because it's not very well cited. Doesn't look like it's been an important part of the field. But you can look up the author by just clicking on the author's name, and you can see how many times they've been cited. You can see what their H index or their 10 index is. These are numbers, honestly, I don't know what they mean. I've looked them up before. There's some kind of range or scale that indicates the importance of the author. You would just need to look it up to see, again, kind of what they did. But you can see that this author has articles that have been cited by 11,000 people. So clearly, they are important in the field. It just seems that this one article that we're looking at probably either was a reprint of an article that was printed somewhere else, or just isn't in a journal that most people use. Must be something else going on that is causing this to be a very lowly cited thing. So see, even though we found that it was only cited by 5 people, we did find that the author is somebody of importance in the field. Now this other author, you can see, has only been cited by 68 people in total. Their articles have come out since 2014. So this person is not very relevant in the field. and is probably not someone who I would want to cite. And then this is the thing, if you have a choice for 5 different articles, and in those 5 different articles, you have one author or one article where the author is very highly cited, and you have another one where the author isn't, you don't need to include all 5 of those articles. Just include the ones that are important, the ones that do show that they have a high number of citations, or whatever this H index or 10I index is. Let's see if it tells us. It's not going to tell us, but it's something that you could definitely look up and see what it means. I've done it before. Obviously I forgot it, so it wasn't that big of a deal to me. To me, citations are more important as an indicator of that. Now, let me go back to the slides really quickly. We're going to pop into the slides and then pop out of them again, but let's just pop back so we can get to where we are. Okay. So clearly, it's obvious that if it's mentioned in a bunch of different reference lists, then that author must be important. But you can also go to the Google Scholar. You can actually look up the author. You can look at what they've done in the field. You can also see how many citations they've had overall. Now, what about developing your topic or developing a topic? If you're doing research and you want to actually develop your topic more, or if I can't tell you how many times I hear from students, doctoral students, who say, oh, I can't find any research on this topic. Well, I run out to Google Scholar, or I run out to the library, and I do a couple of special word searches, keyword searches on different keywords, and I find like 20 articles about it. That happens all the time, but sometimes it is true that you run into a point where, okay, I'm only finding 1 article, or I'm only finding 2 or 3 articles. I know there's more out there, but I'm not finding anything that fits my topic. So there are some things you can do to help develop that. The first is you can use Google Scholar's related articles button. I'll show you that in just a moment. And I do believe the library also has a related articles button in some of the databases. So that is also very helpful. You can look at the references of the article that you found that you really like. And then here's something that most students don't know. You can just email the author. Just email the author and say, hey, I'm looking for some more information on this topic. Do you know anyone else in the field, or have you published any other articles that I might look for or find? And typically an author might even email you a copy of their latest article even before it's published. You could find out maybe who else is in the field that's important, or who else is in the field that's doing something. So you always have that option as something that you can go to. But let me go back and show you some more of what you can do in Google Scholar. Because I think in a lot of ways, Google Scholar is a good jumping off point to help you understand a topic or an author better. Okay, so we'll go back to where we were, and let's go and let's look up something. So we have let's look up women and transformational and leadership. Sometimes it helps to separate them out. Definitely on library searches it does, but okay. So we have some transformational leadership and gender in 4- and 5-star hotels in Tijuana. No Women Left Behind, critical leadership development to build gender consciousness and transform organizations. Teaching leadership, using Wonder Woman to highlight the importance of leadership and gender diversity. Okay, that looks good. That could be an article that we want to look at, and it has a PDF. So we could pull that down, look at the PDF. We see that this is talking about using Wonder Woman, movie club, an in-depth discussion facilitated viewing the movie when it is useful as a teaching tool. Probably not an academic article, but definitely an article that this person is providing their opinion and maybe some of their experience. So that's interesting. So let's say this is exactly what I wanted, but I can't find any more stuff about that. So what you can do is you can go down to here where it says related articles, and you can click on that. Now what it's going to pull up is articles that Google thinks are related to your topic. So you see we got something about Jurassic World that's in another language. We have some movies. So here we have another one. Alternatives to movie sandwich habit. Practical approaches to using movies to teach leadership and power. Bam. Okay. So now we've got 2 articles that we found. And then if we want to say, okay, let's go down this rabbit hole a little bit more, and I'll look down what related articles this are. Now that was a more heavily cited article, so it's pulling up a little bit more, more stuff. So what I'm seeing here is perception of business leaders, an examination of portrayals in motion pictures, mentoring in the movies, ethical decision making in Game of Thrones, applying leadership to Westeros to business. That should be an interesting article. Role play exercise to introduce strengths, paths, theory leadership, character immersion, and organizational behavior. So I'm finding a lot of things that all connect to this concept of film or using film as a leadership tool. So I've now generated a bunch of different options to go to in research. Now the second thing, let's see if this changes. Yes. You can look at the reference list. So I go down to the reference list, and I look down this tiny reference list that I know is really small. But what I'm looking for here, let's see, yeah, is what kind of articles are they citing? So here's a work conflict article. Here's a new theory of family balance. Clark's important in the field. This is a book. No, this is a journal article from 2000. So you look at how recent are the citations? Do they have currency? Meaning, are they a recent citation? We look down and we see other things. Here's a book from 1964. Why are they quoting a book from 1964? Probably it's seminal in the field. There's a really old date. That probably means it's something that came up and has been important in the field since. I could go to Google Scholar and I could look that up and see if it's well cited, maybe even buy it, read it. It's probably a used book, would be really cheap. So, but what I'm seeing is there's a lot of work-life balance thing, which you would expect in something like this. And I'm finding that there's different places I can go to look for articles. Now, when I did this for my dissertation, the reason I did work-life balance, this is what I did for my dissertation, and I was able to find all kinds of things. And one of the things that changed my life was this book right here, Work Less, Live More. This is a book written by a bunch of European academics. Basically it's a book of short chapters or chapters that contain research ideas. It was amazing, and it really helped me to get my dissertation all pulled together. Is Google Scholar peer reviewed? Google Scholar is just a place to collect academic articles. It is not peer reviewed, nor is it not peer reviewed. You have to evaluate the article yourself to see this. So if I look at this list of articles we've just found here, you could see there's different things. You have the Journal of Intergenerational Relationships, the Journal of Leadership, Management Teaching Review. If it says that it's a review, a leadership, a journal, it's going to be peer reviewed. Journals are peer reviewed. This is something for the Association of Talent Development, so that's probably not a peer reviewed journal. That's probably a presentation that they did. Again, so what you're doing is you're looking here to kind of get ideas of articles and to get ideas of how the articles relate to one another when you're trying to develop a topic. If you want to double check to see if it's peer reviewed, you can always go to the library and look the same article up at the library. And you can see that a lot of these articles here aren't available. If it's available, it has a little PDF next to it. Well, none of these seem to be available. I would go to the library to look those up and find them in the library. Okay, so in short, the best way to develop a topic is to dig into an article that you think is really good and see what other articles there are. You can also, in addition to using related articles, you can also use cited by. So this article that we thought was really good has been cited 11 times. So we go and we look to see who's citing it, because often they're talking about a similar topic. So this is like Becoming a Jedi, The Force Awakens through classic leadership perspectives, mentoring in the movies, everyone should something to point to, that kind of thing. Gamification in education. This is a review of literature. It says it right here. It's a review of current publications. So that would be a good thing to dive into if I wanted to learn more about gamification. I could read that, and it's reviewed all the current literature on gamification to give me an overview. So that would be a great overview article. I wouldn't probably cite it because he or she is just reviewing other people's work, but it's definitely a place to go to get information. Okay. Now, that all being said, I can find my, oh, I was looking at the wrong screen. Do we have any questions? Awesome. So if you're watching this, I'm recording this, Marilyn. So if anyone's watching it on the recording and you have a question, please feel free to email me. My email is rankin, R-A-N-K-I-N, P, at CityU.edu. Most of you who are students know that, but if anyone watches this on YouTube in general, you're welcome to email me. All right, well, thank you, Marilyn, for coming. That's all I have today. You didn't really miss anything at the beginning. All we did was I just went over what was going to go in, what we were going to cover during the webinar, so you didn't miss anything. And you have a great rest of your day.